1961 was the first trip by the Aberdeen Scouts to Norway, sailing across the North Sea on the Vomiting Venus. We spent a couple of days in Bergen, visited an island in the fjord, and took the Floybanen funicular to a viewpoint overlooking Bergen city and the harbour. This was the Aberdeen Scouts' first visit to Norway, and quite obviously the Norwegian Scouts' first time they'd met Scots in their kilts. It certainly didn't take them long to borrow the kilts. After a couple of days, we took the train to Voss, where we camped despite the rain. The next day, we took the bus over the Vikafjell Plateau, descending to a ferry across the Sonja Fjord. Then we took a bus to Balestrand, where we pitched tents in the rain before taking them down again and moving in to a nearby hostel. Our idea that camping on a slope did nothing to deter the rain from running through the tents. The next day, we took the bus up the 2,000-foot climb to the top of the Gaulafjell in the rain, had a walk, and then caught the bus back to Balestrand. And the following day, we made a long ferry journey up the Sonja Fjord and down the Orland Fjord to Flam, where we caught the train up to Myrdal, a climb of 2,844 feet in just 8.5 miles, stopping along the way to admire the Kjosfossen waterfall. At Myrdal, we caught the main line Oslo to Bergen train back down to Voss, where the Norwegians joined us at camp. Most of the party went for a walk along the beach, leaving Bryan to catch a fish for supper, but his efforts were not well rewarded. Next day, raining again, we took the bus to Gronstad, the start of the hike. Alan Duthie, in preparation for his future role as scout leader, made sure that he was the first one into a tent. After the first long lie of the trip, and the first day it wasn't raining, we broke camp and headed across the hills to the Hardanger Fjord and our camp at Oystersea. En route, we had to ford the river, and a couple of 100 metres down the opposite bank, we forded it again. When asked why, the Norwegians' response was that it added interest to the hike. One of the highlights of the hike was the blueberries, which grew in profusion along the route, and they were eaten on the hoof and harvested for a later pudding. A Norwegian turned up with a van full of kit, and a substantial camp was pitched. Much cooking was embarked upon, which inevitably involved the ubiquitous meatballs. In nice weather at Oystersea, we had a flag break ceremony for each national flag and spent the rest of the day settling in. The next day, the van transported everyone to Ufhusfossen, where we were able to walk behind the waterfall, a new experience for the Aberdeen Scouts. We went to look at the Tokail Pass, the route followed by the main road to Bergen through the Kamskogen Mountains. After an early rise, we walked to Oystersea, where we caught the bus back to Bergen. In Bergen, we stayed again in the scout hut. The Norwegians got back into our kilts. And we taught each other some new songs. The song that I remember is Kom Caroline må kom, je kom to Bergens by, men ta med paraply, which of course means bring your umbrella.
time in Oslo had passed in relative comfort, being holiday makers, seeing the sights of the Norwegian capital. And it was on a Monday morning when we boarded the train to take us up into the mountains. The railway, completed in 1909 after 34 years of construction, links Oslo to Bergen. The train rolled on ever upwards with more bare rock and mountainside to see. Snow patches became more frequent and the blue ice of the Hardangervidda glacier could be glimpsed. This was exciting, getting to be an adventure. But after a brief stop at Finse, the train left the plateau and the downhill run to Mjolfjell, our destination, returned us to a tamer terrain of trees and fields. Just as well, we were to camp here overnight. We now met our Norwegian hosts and started our preparations for the hike. All the kit considered unnecessary for life was packed up in assorted kit bags. Off-winter uniforms and kilts. Later, some would regret dispatching that spare woolly jumper. We were sorted out into patrols and settled down to get to know each other. The map shows the route of the hike from Finse to Vassbygde, with the overnight stops to camp or to stay in a hut. It involved 30 miles or 50 kilometres over 3 days of walking. The vast, rough mountain landscape down through the most idyllically green blooming valley Ørlandsdalen to the fjords. The valley used to be the most important connection between East and West Norway, and has houses where farming has been traced back to the 1600s and possibly earlier. It doesn't seem much, but for most of us who hadn't done anything like this before, it was a massive undertaking. How we trusted our leaders. The Norwegians, who all looked bigger, stronger, more suntanned and fitter than us, didn't seem to eat very much when they were camping, and we too had to get used to a diet of bread and cheese, sometimes meatballs, and the curious fruit soup. They clearly had much more experience in hiking and camping. To them, the journey ahead of us was just a stroll in the country. The next day, early on a chilly morning, we took down the tents and packed our rucksacks before having breakfast on the train back up the line to Finse. At Finse, at 1200 metres, it was cold and sleety. Nobody had said it would be this cold. We huddled in doorways. We shivered and stamped our feet, keen to get going. Surely anywhere would be better than this. Not so. Loaded down with the increasingly bought food, the Norwegians in particular carrying seemingly massive loads, we set off uphill to the highest point in the walk at 1600 metres. Luckily for us, the Norwegian Trekking Association had provided a most welcome hut for us to have lunch in, away from the weather. In the continuing sleet and sometimes snow, our plastic macks and cycle capes defying all that the Norwegian summer could throw at us, and our cotton jackets greedily soaking up the plentiful moisture. The clearly marked path with a red T every so often ensured that we were heading in the right direction, although some of us thought that the right direction was back to Finse. The hike was now mostly downhill in improving weather, and although it was still cold, our wet clothes dried as we went along. We were very pleased to reach the end of our day's walk at Gjeteryggen hut. Here the intention was to camp outside, but the prospect of a freezing night in thin sleeping bags prompted Uwe, the Norwegian scout leader, to get us all bedded down in the attic of the hut for 1 Norwegian kroner each. In 1965, there were 20 Norwegian kroners to the pound. The following day, fortified, poisoned some will later say, with a good breakfast of Norwegian porridge against the still bitter cold, we set off into more magnificent scenery. A plateau of lakes, rocky outcrops and snow patches, the path winding between them. As we went on, the streams became rivers. The plateau gave way to cliffs, resulting in spectacular waterfalls crashing and splashing into the valleys. The thundering roar of these torrents, topped up by the recent torrential rain, was constantly in our ears all the way down the valley. We stopped at the Steinbergdalen tourist hut for a drink of fresh milk from the local cows, served by a girl in traditional Norwegian dress. Despite these attractions, we had to move on down the valley, on narrow paths and over scary bridges, past more and even more spectacular waterfalls, to Grønnestad. Grønnestad, a surprisingly large flat field in the midst of cliff and plunging valleys. Another freezing night for us to endure after singing and campfire. Another day, and after a leisurely start, more walking down the valley with stupendous views at every turn. It had been arranged that we would stop at Orsebo for a special Norwegian farm lunch of rummegrøt, a traditional porridge-like dish made from soured milk and wheat, a very acquired taste, and some dried meat and bread. Outside in the field, a football was chased around, and some went in the water and attempted to row. Reluctantly, we moved on from the farm, along the path, round and down through scrubby woodland, now steeply down beside a sheer cliff. The path terraced into the hillside, and where that was impossible, a causeway was in place. The planned campsite was in this precipitous area, but the possibility of someone rolling out of bed and ending up hundreds of feet below made this too risky, and we walked on to Vassbygda camping as close as possible to the bus stop, as we'd have to be up and ready to go the next day for a 7 o'clock departure. Parts of the route we walked in 1965 are no longer possible, as hydro dams have been built, creating two lakes, flooding large sections of the second day's walk. And now much of the remaining route can be driven on a fast road. Yetterigan is still a walk in from the road or railway at Finse. As advertised, all 22 of us squeezed onto a very small vehicle, and an hour's journey took us to Flum, the start of the railway to Myrtle. In Flum we drank solo, the local fizzy orange, and wrote postcards. Suitably refreshed, we boarded a train, and an hour's run took us from sea level at the Sonnefjord to the Myrtle mountain station at 900 metres, stopping at viewpoint to see more spectacular waterfalls. At Myrtle, the line connects with the route to Bergen. The final leg of the hike was the walk from Vassbygde to Ireland in the mist and rain to take the ferry to Gudvangen and then a bus to Voss over a tortuous road not for the nervous passenger. Our journey included a stop at Stalheim Hotel, not for a coffee, but to see a view. We marched through the hotel, rather a smart place in our damp and grubby hiking clothes to see the view, shrouded in mist. There was plenty of time in Voss to eat a good lunch, no more rummegrot, before getting the train down to Bergen.
you.